So in our previous lesson, we were talking about solving one-step equations, and today we're going to look at solving two-step equations. So the objective for this lesson is to solve that two-step equation, and it will only be in one variable. And this goes along with the standard to solve linear equations and inequalities, including equations with coefficients represented by letters. So there's a lot of vocabulary in there that we've talked about. Remember, the coefficient is the number in front of the variable. The variable is nothing more than the letter representing a value in the problem. So some equations involve more than one operation. For example, we've got this equation up here, 5x plus 2 is equal to 12. This problem involves both addition, adding 2, and the multiplication of the variable by 5. So in such problems, we're going to start the exact same way. I want to find the variable that I want to isolate. So in this problem, my variable that needs isolated is x. So now that I'm realizing that I need to get x all by itself, before I can do that, I've got to try to isolate the term that includes the x. So that would be this term. Ultimately, I want to get x by itself. But before I can get the x by itself, I've got to isolate the term. Remember, terms are separated by pluses and minuses. I've got to get the term by itself that has the x. So that means I've got to get rid of this positive 2 out here. Well, we learned the other day that in order, or actually you've learned this long ago, that to get rid of something, we can do the opposite. So if I have 2, to get rid of 2, I would subtract 2. So if I have a positive 2, want to get rid of it, I can subtract 2. Well, we know whatever I do on one side of the equal sign, to keep it equal, we're sticking here with the equality, to keep it equal, I must also do it to the other side of the equal sign. So positive 2 take away 2 is 0, so now that's gone. I don't want to write 5x plus 0. I just want to write 5x. 12 take away 2 is 10. Now we're that much closer to isolating our variable. We've got the term with the x all by itself. Now what we need to do is get the x all by itself. And so I would do this by undoing the multiplication. What operation undoes multiplication? Division. The division property of equality tells me if I divide one side by 5, I must divide the other side by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, so I have x, because 1 times x is just x, equals 10 divided by 5 is 2. We should always check. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 plus 2 is 12, so we know we did it correctly. So go ahead and pause the video and try to work this problem out. Give yourself a few seconds. Okay, let's check and see how you did. So first of all, think about what we're wanting to isolate. We're wanting to get the term with the x all by itself. So if I want to do that, I need to isolate it by getting rid of this positive 3. Well, the subtraction property of equality tells me if I subtract 3 from this side, to keep my problem equal, to not change it, I must subtract the other side by 3. So that's what I did here. 3 take away 3 we know is 0, so I didn't write it. We don't need to write it. So I have 2x is equal to 15 minus 3, which was 12. At this point, I need to isolate my variable. So to get that x by itself, I'm going to use the division property of equality. If I divide this side by 2, I must divide the other side by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 times x is just x. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So now I have my solution is x equals 6. Once again, plug it in and check. 2 times 6 we know is 12. 12 plus 3 is 15. Okay, community service. You're making a bulletin board to advertise the community service opportunities available to the Key Club students here at Portsmouth West High School. You plan to use half a sheet of construction paper for each ad. You need 5 sheets of construction paper for a title banner. You have 18 sheets of construction paper. How many can you make? So let's think about a plan here. We're going to have to write an equation to be able to solve it. So I told you in class before that a lot of times the information's right there in front of us all the time. The information's right there in front of us. The hard part is figuring out what it is they're trying to tell us and write it into an equation. So it says that we're going to use half a sheet of construction paper for each ad. I'm just going to write this out. Half a sheet each ad. Okay. I need 5 sheets of construction paper for a title banner. So plus the 5 sheets for the title banner. And I have 18 sheets of construction paper all together. So I have a total, we know total represents an equal sign, a total of 18. So it wants to know how many can I make. Well, if I'm using half a sheet per ad, half per ad. So let's define our variable here. We'll just let X represent the number of ads we can have. So half a sheet of paper per each ad plus the 5 sheets that I'm going to use for my banner gives me a total of 18. Well, we know we can subtract that 5 away right off the bat because we're using it for the banner. So really we only have a half equals 13. I just subtracted the 5 from each side. So at this point, how do I get rid of a fraction? Well, a lot of people think, okay, well, it's being multiplied, so I'm going to divide. A half divided by a half is a really ugly thing. So when I'm dealing with fractions, we know to, instead of dividing, we multiply by the reciprocal. That means I'm flipping the fraction over. Why would I do this? 2 times 1 is 2, 1 times 2 is 2, 2 over 2 is 1, 1 times x is just x. So 13 times 2 is 26. So how many ads can we make? We can make 26 ads. Okay, so what is the solution of x minus 7 divided by 3 equals negative 12? Okay, so I always think of this line as being a big grouping symbol. It's kind of like what's up here is in parentheses. So I have x minus 7 all being divided by 3 is equal to negative 12. So I want to get x by itself. And in the past, in the previous problems, what we did was we would have added 7 to both sides. But this is different because this time the whole thing is being divided by the 3. So what I need to do first is get rid of that 3 down in the bottom. So how do I get rid of something being divided by 3? Well, I can multiply by 3 because we know 3 over 3 is 1. 1 times x minus 7 is just x minus 7. Well, if I times one side by 3, I must also use the multiplication property of equality and multiply the other side by 3. And I get negative 36. Now it's easy to see how to isolate our variable. To get x by itself, use the addition property of equality, adding 7 to both sides. Since these are different signs, I'm going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. So I know it's going to be negative. 36 minus 7 would be 29. So negative 29 is my answer. We can plug it back in. Negative 29 minus 7 would be negative 36. Negative 36 divided by 3 is negative 12. So it works. So you go ahead and pause the video and try the bottom one. For my solution, I came up with 26. I used the multiplication property of equality, multiply both sides by 4, giving me 24 is equal to x minus 2. Then I added 2 to both sides and got 26 is equal to x. Okay, go ahead and try these problems. Pause the video and work these out on a sheet of paper and see what you can come up with. Okay, let's talk about these answers. I went ahead and wrote it out horizontally so that I could justify each step. So in the first step, I had a positive 8, so to get rid of that, I subtracted 8. The subtraction property of equality says if I do it over here, I have to do it somewhere on the other side of the equal sign. So then I just combined my like terms. 8 take away 8 was nothing, 0. We don't write the 0. 3 take away 8 was negative 5. So I combined like terms. Then I used the division property of equality to get rid of this negative. A negative divided by a negative we know is a positive. So I divided one side by -1, therefore, using the division property of equality, I must divide the other side by -1, giving me t equals 5. Okay, down at the bottom, I had a -5, so I added 5 to both sides. This is known as the addition property of equality. If we're going to justify each step, I'm just going to abbreviate addition property of equality. Okay, then I just simplified by combining like terms. 4 plus 5 is 9, -5 plus 5 is 0. Then I use the multiplication property of equality. I multiplied both sides by 3 because x was being divided by 3, so to get rid of that I multiplied both sides by 3. The 3's cancel each other out by becoming 1. 1 times x is just x. 9 times 3 is 27. So I simplified, and there is my answer. Okay, and that is all I have for this lesson. On Monday, you will be receiving an assignment to go along with these 2 video lessons.